All right, grab a coffee and let's go. Good evening, Glue Troopers. Max of Max's Models here. I was going to go out and work on the Tarhi today, the Sky Crane, but I thought I would knock out a quick morning video. It's now 5:38 in the evening, and I'm still working on it because the more I dug into this, the deeper it got. It turned into a real rabbit hole. And this is, of course, about the early 1950s Aurora and Lindberg MiG-19s. So here is the short story to try and explain, and some of this is going to be partial guesswork on my part, but here's the way I think it went. In 1944, Kurt Tank over at Focke-Wulf was commissioned by the German government to try and come up with a jet, and he developed something that was never built called the TA-183 by Focke-Wulf. And they did get a wind tunnel model made, but that's as far as they got with it. After the war, he went down to Argentina and built an airplane, I believe it was called the Pacuy, which did actually get built. They made 4 flying ones and 1 test model for static ground work, which I think the ground test unit still exists. But the actual TA-183 was never built. But drawings and stuff did get out. People had an idea of what it was supposed to look like. So the war ends, a lot of capture technology. The Russians are developing their own jets. And one thing they came up with was the Yak-25. They only made one. It looked like a little straight wing MiG-15. So 1948, the Yak-25 gets flown and tested. Kind of a disappointment. They go with McCoy in design. Then in 1952, Topps, the company that makes the baseball cards and things like that, makes a aircraft identification card for what they call the MiG-19, but it's actually just a drawing of the TA-183. Now, it's my guess, since this came out a year before Aurora introduced their model jet of what was the Yak-25 and then renamed the MiG-19, my best guess, it's an inference on my part, is that they saw this and decided, oh, let's make that. And even though Topping had called it the MiG-19, Aurora, the first year they released it, called it the Yak-25. And this has no relation to the actual Yak-25 flashlight that went into serial production about 7 years later. The next year, Aurora sells the same kit renamed as the MiG-19. However, this was also the year in 1954 when Lindberg came out with their kit of the MiG-19. Now, this airplane, I believe, was based on either the MiG I-320, which was a test airplane they only made 2 of, or the Sukhoi 15. Not the Sukhoi 15 Flagon that would come out many years later. Sometimes these companies reuse the names or the identifiers for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is funding. Sometimes projects have to rob funding from different accounts. A country may not have any money set aside for developing a new aircraft, but they do have money set aside for upgrading older aircraft, so a new design will get the older design's name just to keep the money rolling in. It happens a lot of places. Well, a few years later, apparently the Russian kit model maker, which has become known as Young Technicians, although there were other names for it, found the Lindberg kit and apparently decided to copy it instead of making an accurate MiG-19. Now, a few years later, they did make a slightly more accurate MiG-19, although to be honest, it really looks more like a MiG-17 than a MiG-19. But the main thing to take away from this is that there were probably a couple of reasons that they decided to copy what they knew was an incorrect design. One, there were no security issues with it, because you cannot overstate how paranoid the Russians were about security during the Cold War. And also, they could simply make a mold from an existing Lindberg kit and quickly start knocking out copies. Now, I was gifted this kit from the Young Technicians, and I cannot find it in ScaleMates or anywhere else. I have no idea when it came out. I'm guessing the late 60s or early 70s. And except for a few gear doors and the rockets and the shape of the stand, it's pretty much identical to the Lindberg kit. So I'm fairly certain it was a clone of it. So to draw a quick timeline, 1944, Kurt Tank and the guys at Focke-Wulf designed the TA-183, but it never gets built. 1948, the Russians build one Yak-25, not to be confused with the actual Yak-25 that did get fielded years later. 1952, Topps uses a picture of the TA-183 to draw up the fictitious MiG-19. 1953, Aurora uses that design but calls it the Yak-25. 1954, Lindberg uses the I-320 or possibly the Su-15 prototypes as the idea for the MiG-19, and in that same year, Aurora renames their Yak-25 the MiG-19. Some years after that, Young Technicians gets their hands on the Lindberg aircraft and makes their own knockoff copy. Probably in the late 60s, somewhere in the late 60s or early 70s, now that the MiG-19 is probably no longer a frontline fighter, they make a somewhat more accurate model of it, which still looks a lot more like a MiG-17 than a MiG-19. A couple of quick side notes about the MiG-19. They did have one of them, an experimental one they made with just one engine, but it didn't work. And it was really designed as a competitor to the American F-100. Both of them had similar issues with handling and high speed. So as best as I can figure it out, these are the reasons why Aurora and Lindberg put out two aircraft that never really existed, although they did follow a logical format, and they probably sold fairly well at the time. Now, of course, they're collector's items simply for their rarity. The idea that the wrong airplane was deliberately copied could be, as I mentioned earlier, simply a matter of ease, or perhaps there was even some military security involved. Don't really know. But rare they are, and I'm really happy to have one. It reminds me of that episode of Star Trek Next Generation called The Most Toys, where the collector tries to get Data, but he shows him this Roger Maris baseball card from 1962 that still has the scent of bubblegum. And I take a little whiff of the styrene and, I can smell good old Soviet Russia.
I said, ooh, come on, baby, turn the lights off.
Well, guys, that's what I've got for tonight. Wow, this little 6-7 minute video ate the whole day. Every time I was ready to go compile it, I'd find some interesting little tidbit and have to make slides, and I can stop anytime I want. I just don't want. Oh, by the way, real quick, just for those who don't know, the MiG-19 was, I believe, Russia's first production twin-engine fighter. They were pretty problematic, had maybe a 10-year front roll life with Russia, but they were made by several other countries, and a lot of them stayed in service for a long time. And some of them did get some kills. Okay, that's all I got for right now, guys. You take care of yourselves, and as always, model on.
I said, ooh, come on, baby, turn the lights off. Ooh, 'cause it's getting late. I said, ooh, I know you're gonna try to hang tough. Ooh, you shouldn't hesitate. it's getting late. I said, ooh, I know you're gonna try to hang tough. Ooh, you shouldn't hesitate. I said, ooh, come on, baby, turn the lights on. Ooh, 'cause it's getting late. Yeah. I said, ooh, I know you're gonna try to hang tough.
Do I have room on the shelf for that Aurora model, or should I just build it? That was very foolish, Mr. Yakov. Oh, Tim, how would you not make an airplane look like this? Artem for Artem McCoy of Mig McCoy and Gruerich. This is a kind of a cool looking airplane. I could totally see this thing, fighting Steve Kenyon.